Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's daily devotional. It's a privilege to be able to bring it to you here today. As you can see by the background, I am not in my office today. I'm visiting my daughter in Vancouver, Washington. So, thanks to technology, I'm still able to bring you today's daily devotional. Today, we are in Matthew chapter 20. Verses 17 through 34. So it's the final 17 verses of the Gospel of Matthew chapter 20. In this Gospel of Matthew study, we have seen Jesus do incredible things, and today we are going to see four things in the final 17 verses that he is going to deal with us and teach us. We have betrayal, a place of special status, true greatness, and Jesus heals in these final verses as we wrap up Matthew chapter 20. So let's get right into this and see what God has in store for us today. We're going to start with the first thing that Jesus is going to talk about, and that is betrayal. And here's what it says. Now Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. And so Jesus right away starts with something that's not a surprise to them because he says, Behold, we're going to go up to Jerusalem. That's, again, not a surprise because they were on their way to Jerusalem. All Jewish men and their families accompanying them would be required to attend one of the or three of the feasts every year in Jerusalem, and this one being Passover. So that was not a surprise to them that they were headed to Jerusalem, but it was a surprise when Jesus gave this statement. He gave a prophetic statement of what would happen. They probably did not understand it or really comprehend what was going on or what was going to happen, but he was giving a prophetic statement of what was going to happen when they got there, when Jesus said that he's going to be betrayed, he's going to be condemned, he's going to be delivered up, he's going to be mocked, scourged, and crucified, and on the third day, he's going to rise again. Charles Spurgeon said of this scene, he said of Jesus, he said, This he said in the hearing of the disciple who would act the traitor. He spoke this in front of Judas, who would be the one who would actually betray him. He was part of the group of the 12 disciples that he was speaking this to. Now, it appears that the disciples didn't really listen to what Jesus was saying because their expectation had always been on Jesus establishing the political kingdom, the messianic kingdom here and now. And so it really didn't fit the narrative that all of these people had of what the Messiah was going to be. All along, I have told you through this that there were two ideas of what the Messiah was. That the Messiah was both Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David. The Messiah ben David was the Messiah who would come and reestablish his kingdom and set up his kingdom and his rule. That is the coming of Jesus. That is the second coming, that he will come in that manner. This time, he is being delivered up the way that Joseph was being delivered up, the way that Joseph was being betrayed by his brothers. Jesus was going to be betrayed by his own brothers, his own fellow countrymen. The people he loved, the people he cared about, those are the ones that were going to deliver him up and betray him. And so Jesus gives a prophetic statement of this betrayal that was going to happen. And he says they were going to betray him, condemn him to death, deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge. The third day he will rise again. And this was something that he was just announcing that would happen. He was giving himself over to this. He was foretelling all that was going to happen over the things that he was not going to have control over. These things were just going to happen. He didn't walk away from it. He didn't run away from this thing that was going to happen. The mocking, the scourging, we know that that was going to be just an incredible amount of pain, an incredible amount of turmoil that he was going to have to go through. The crucifixion would be the most painful thing that man could imagine. It was the worst form of execution that people could possibly think up in their minds. And that is exactly what was going to happen to Jesus. And the suffering that he was going to go through was beyond the cross. He was going to suffer in multiple ways. He was going to suffer not only the physical pain, but he was also going to suffer the emotional and spiritual pain. There was the separation between him and God. There was the humiliation and degradation that he would experience. There was the insults that he would go through. There was the injustice that he would have to face. There was the disloyalty of people who followed him, the disloyalty even of his friends and his own followers. He was going to be rejected and despised, as was prophesied about him in the Old Testament. It was the prophecy of the suffering servant, the suffering Messiah. All that was prophesied came to pass as Jesus was approaching Jerusalem and as he was going to go through these final days. I don't think it's anything that we can even comprehend the pain, the suffering, the physical and the emotional and the spiritual things that Jesus went through, and that's all that he was looking forward to. But he gives a promise at the very end of it, and he says, "And the third day he will rise again." That was the ultimate promise of all that Jesus would go through. He would suffer all those things to get to the third day, in which he would finally rise again and conquer death. Now, Matthew kind of shifts gears. He goes from the betrayal that Jesus is going to experience, and it just almost feels out of place that right after that, there was this place of special status that was being requested by a mom. It didn't fit with what Jesus was just talking about, but there is a little time that passes here in this conversation. But again, it just feels a little bit out of place for Jesus to go from betrayal to somebody who then becomes selfish and wanting their own selfish requests granted. Let's look at this place of special status, and it happens in verses 20 and 21. And it says, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons." Now, we don't, again, know how much time passed between the time that Jesus had this conversation about his being betrayed to the point of Zebedee's mother coming to him with her sons. Um, so there's a little bit of time, but we don't know how much time. Again, it kind of feels weird that that would happen right after this. But it says the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from Jesus. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom." A weird response, a weird request that a mother was asking on behalf of her sons. She wants a special place and a special status for these sons. She was the mother of James and John, two of the disciples that were following. Two of the disciples that were walking with Jesus, who were there with him the entire time. Obviously, they were cared about. Jesus had already promised the reward. If you remember that, a couple of devotionals ago, Jesus had already promised that they were going to be rewarded. In fact, we know that they were going to sit on the 12 thrones, 12 of, it says 24 thrones in Revelation, that will judge the tribes of the nation of Israel. So we know that they're going to have a special status. They are going to be rewarded. We also know that everybody is going to be rewarded. Everybody is going to have the rewards of the kingdom of heaven, and God is going to bless those. And it will be up to him to determine what that is. It will be by his grace that he will do this. But she came. She was probably a regular member of the people who actually followed Jesus. She was probably one of the followers of Jesus in the larger crowd. She wasn't part of the 12, obviously. That was just her two sons. And she came and she asked this special request of, "I want a prominent position for my sons to sit in when you have your messianic administration." Again, they're thinking of Jesus in the political terms, that he's coming as a conquering king, as a political Messiah, more than as a suffering Messiah. That's still in their minds. And she is asking this request: "Please let them sit on the right hand and on the left." D.A. Carson, who was a Bible commentator, said, "The right hand and the left hand suggest proximity to the king's person, and so a share in his prestige and power." Now, in Matthew 19:28, again, I was just referring to what we had just read earlier. The thrones are already assured. They've already been assigned. They're already given. The only thing they don't know is which ones that they will sit on. That's part of what happened in heaven, part of the kingdom. But she's coming basically with a selfish request, and that is a mom looking out for her sons, wanting them to sit in a position of power and prominence. The response of Jesus is going to be kind of interesting as well. So let's look at the response that Jesus gives. Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" Now, what cup was he about to drink? Well, it was the cup of being of suffering, of going through pain and turmoil and agony. He says, "You don't know what you're about to ask. Can you drink the cup? Can you be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" And they said to him, "We are able." So he said to them, "Actually, you are. You will indeed drink my cup. You are going to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. The Holy Spirit is what would baptize them in the book of Acts. But to sit on my right hand," he says, "and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father." Again, this is just an allusion to that it's already been determined by God. God has already determined the setup of the thrones that will happen. They will have a place of prominence. They will have a place among the thrones of the judgment of the tribes of Israel. They just don't know which is going to happen. Jesus even alludes to he doesn't know. It's going to be his Father who is in heaven. Now, I've said, I've had that kind of question before of if Jesus couldn't know that, then how can he really be God? If he doesn't know the time that he's going to return, how can he really be God? Well, there are things that Jesus left aside in heaven when he came to earth. He is both fully God and fully human. All the things that Jesus alludes to is the common practice of the day. It says that when it's talking about Jesus returning, and we're going to get to that part in Matthew, but Jesus is going to return. He doesn't know when the day or the hour is. That is a reference to the way that the wedding feast would happen. Only the father of the wedding feast, only the father of the groom would know when it was time to return and get the bride. Jesus is alluding to the common practice of the day. So Jesus says, I'm not sure. It's up to my Father. There are things that Jesus laid aside in coming as fully human into this world. He was both fully God, fully human, but he did lay things aside in his humanity to be able to come and be that fully human Savior that we need. So Jesus says, I don't know. You are going to get a place of reward, but it is not up to me. You will, though, suffer the way that I'm suffering. And all of the disciples, every one of them, except for John, would die a martyr's death. They would die in a horrible way. They would all be martyred for their faith. They counted it as a blessing. They counted it as being worthy of Christ to die in that manner. I think that's a concept that we have really lost in this day, that we are willing to suffer and go through the same fate that our Lord went through because of our commitment and our love for him. Even in the last days, many will turn away and quit following him because it's just too hard, and I don't want to go through the suffering. Our suffering is nothing in comparison to what Jesus actually went through. And John, the only one who didn't die a martyr's death, they tried to kill him. They tried multiple times to kill him, and he just wouldn't die. God protected him through it, and he needed to live because he needed to finish out and write and see the revelation that we are, by the way, going to get into down the road here in our daily devotionals. Well, now Jesus is going to determine true greatness, and this is that the disciples' reaction, in the disciples' reaction, Jesus is going to set forth what true greatness is. So let's look at this. So true greatness, here's what it says. And when the 10 heard it, um, and what did they hear? They heard the conversation that the mom had asked, can you make sure that my two boys sit, one on the right, one on the left? When the other 10 heard it, they were irritated with the two brothers. They were greatly displeased, it says, with the two brothers. I think that they were a little bit irritated with the request that they had made. Jesus called them to himself, wanting to calm down this division and this animosity that they might start to feel toward each other, the bitterness, and this is, by the way, they had started this conversation back in Matthew 18, where they asked who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. They were arguing about that fact, and it just continued on for 2 chapters that they were arguing about position and power and prestige and where they would rank. Jesus called him to himself. He said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them." And he's referring to the Roman government. The Romans had a system of rule that the rulers would rule over the common people. So don't seek to be a ruler. Don't seek for that great authority. because those who are great, they exercise authority over them. And it wasn't good authority, it was bad authority that the Roman rulers held over the people that were underneath them. Jesus says, "Yet it shall not be so among you." And then he's going to give the principle that he has given multiple times in 18, 19, and 20. And this is a common theme that he has brought back several times. He says, "It shall not be so among you. Whoever desires to be great among you, let him be your servant. Whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." This is that pattern and that theme that you've seen for 3 chapters. The theme is this: the last will be first, the first are going to be last. If you want to be great, be a servant. If you want to, if your picture of greatness is sitting on a throne and ruling over everybody else, you don't understand the kingdom. The kingdom is about servanthood. The kingdom is about humility. The kingdom is about dependence. It's about brokenness. It's about coming to God in true trust and in true dependence upon Him. And if you really want greatness, here's what greatness is going to look like. It's being a servant of all, surrendering to all, being somebody who comes in humility, not seeking the limelight, not seeking prestige, but seeking to serve. That's who Jesus was. He left his glory. He left his ruling status on a throne. He left his power and his authority in order to come to this world, not to lord over the world, not to rule over the world. He came in order to serve the world. And the way he served was by giving his life as a ransom for many. So don't seek power, don't seek prestige, don't seek influence, don't seek worldly blessings. Seek first to be a servant of all, to give your life. It doesn't matter what your position is, even in being a Christian, being a follower of his. It doesn't matter if you are somebody standing up on a stage. It doesn't matter if you're somebody who has a lot of titles behind their name. It is for every person to be a servant. If you're um, a a mom, you can serve your family. If you're a husband, you can serve your family. If you're in the ministry, you can serve your flock and your congregation. Don't seek to have status, seek to serve all. Jesus says, "I came to give my life as a ransom." The common idea of a ransom was the payment that was made to purchase a slave. Jesus came to make payment in order to purchase people that are in bondage. See, every one of us in this world are in bondage to sin. We are slaves to sin, and Jesus came to pay the price in order to buy us and set us free from the sin that we are in. That's the ultimate picture of a servant. Him willing to give his life for us. Him willing to die for people that are slaves to sin who least deserve it. We don't deserve God's kindness. We don't deserve God's forgiveness. But Jesus came anyway to serve and to give his life as a ransom for all who would call upon him and all who would trust him. Well, one final thing that we have in this chapter, chapter 20, is is a picture again of what Jesus came to do, and that is that Jesus came to heal. So Jesus heals. Matthew 20, verses 29 through 31. There's a story. 2 blind men are coming. They are trying to get the attention of Jesus, and Jesus, in his grace and in his mercy, heals them. And what's amazing about this is that Jesus is looking at betrayal. He's going to Jerusalem. He's looking at the cross. He knows he's going to be scourged. He's going to be mocked. He's going to suffer. It's going to be painful emotionally, spiritually, physically, things that we can't even comprehend and understand. Jesus does. He does all of that, and yet in the middle of all of that, people are still coming to him, still needing healing. He doesn't think of himself. He doesn't think of what he's going to have to go through. He turns his attention to people who genuinely needs healing and who genuinely needs grace. That's what he does. He's dealing with his disciples who are selfishly looking about greatness, and yet he still turns his mercy, or his attention and his mercy, to people who are in desperate need. Look at the story. Now, as they went out of Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, two blind men were sitting by the road, and when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David." If you remember that phrase, Son of David, that was a messianic term. That was Messiah, Messiah ben David, Son of David. Have mercy on us, they were saying, God, Messiah, O Lord, our Messiah. Then the multitude warned them that they should be quiet, but they cried out all the more, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David." Again, that's the messianic view. They were thinking of Jesus as the conquering king. This is why people really struggled at the end. This is why they struggled with him dying. They didn't understand this. It didn't fit their concept of what the Messiah was going to be. It was very confusing to them. They were seeing Jesus as a political Messiah, a kingly Messiah. So they cried out, "Be merciful. Please have mercy. Have compassion upon us, O Lord, Son of David." And it says, "So Jesus stood still, and he called them and said, 'What do you want me to do for you?' And they said to him, 'Lord, that our eyes may be opened.' So Jesus had compassion and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him." What an amazing story. They were crying out to Jesus, and Jesus said the statement, "What do you want me to do for you?" I love that statement because it's almost like that's the picture of what God says to each of us. What do you want me to do for you? They didn't say, "Well, I want to be wealthier than anybody else around me. I want to have all the material blessings that I could possibly have. God, you owe me money, you owe me riches, you owe me blessings." That's not what they said. They just wanted compassion. They just wanted to see that their eyes may be opened. Think of that analogy from a spiritual perspective as well. Lord, please just open the eyes of my heart. Paul says in Ephesians, he says, "I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened." That's the ultimate picture of what Jesus does. When you say, "Jesus, when he says, 'What do you want me to do?' You pray this, "Lord, open the eyes of my heart. Help my heart to be enlightened. Help my heart to be opened." The disciples and the crowd most likely wanted these guys just to be shut up. Make them be quiet. Quit bothering him. Jesus doesn't, he's got enough on his mind. He doesn't need to be bothered by you two. But Jesus didn't do that. He called them and says, what do you want? What can I do for you? Please just open the eyes, open our eyes. Just open them so that we can see. And Jesus had compassion, and he touched their eyes, and they immediately received sight. And the response was they began to follow him. That is the ultimate picture of our spiritual lives. We are in bondage to slavery. We are in bondage and in slavery to sin. We are bound up by the sin of our lives. We are headed for hell. We are deserving of hell. We are deserving of the cross. But Jesus looks at us and says, "What can I do for you?" And the ultimate thing that we need in our lives is that our hearts, our eyes, the eyes of our hearts are opened, that we become open to the spiritual things, that our eyes are open to who Jesus is. When you come to Jesus in that manner, "Jesus, please heal me. Please open the eyes of my life. Open my spiritual eyes." Jesus looks with compassion. He touches your heart, and immediately they receive sight. Immediately you receive salvation. And they followed him, and we follow him. We become his followers. We become his disciples. That's the picture of what this whole spiritual life is about. It's the picture of why Jesus came. He came to heal. He came to open the eyes. He came with compassion. He came as a servant. He came to go to the cross, to take the sin and punishment that we deserved. And when we come to him in that same crying out, "Lord, please have compassion on me," he touches us, opens the eyes of our hearts. Immediately we receive salvation, and immediately we turn and follow him. I hope that that's a decision that you have made in your life, that you have committed your heart and your life to him, and you are following him the way that these two blind men did. Well, I hope that you got something out of today's message. Have a great day, and I will see you back here